Ever been told you're not tough enough? She heard it all, too soft, too slow, not built for this. But when she stepped on the mat, one move silenced every doubt. Before they could blink, the black belt was on the floor, gasping. Before starting the story, where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear. Her name was Talia Mendez, and she wasn't what you'd expect in a fight gym. Born in a quiet suburb just outside Santa Rosa, California, she grew up in a house full of books, classical music, and gentle voices. Her parents were artists, her mother a watercolorist, her father a violinist. So physical toughness wasn't exactly a family trait. In school, she was the kid who always helped clean up, apologized when others bumped into her, and read during recess. She moved through life without much noise. But soft doesn't mean weak. Beneath her quiet demeanor was an ocean of unspoken frustration, a longing to feel power ripple through her body instead of fear. Jiu-jitsu hadn't been her first choice. In fact, she had almost walked past the gym that day, overwhelmed by the noise spilling from its open doors. But something made her stop. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe defiance, or maybe, deep down, she was tired of people thinking they already knew her story. That was the day Talia rewrote her first chapter. The first time they laughed at her, it wasn't even behind her back. It was straight to her face. Talia had just stepped into the jiu-jitsu gym, still adjusting her borrowed GI, when one of the senior students snorted and muttered, "She looks like she's here for yoga." The others chuckled, not even trying to hide it. She stood there, unsure whether to speak or walk away. She wasn't naive. She knew what she looked like. Small frame, soft-spoken, skin too delicate for bruises, hands that looked more at home flipping book pages than gripping collars. But what they didn't know was what had brought her here. The long nights spent crying in silence, the quiet decision to stop letting the world push her around, and the ache in her chest that demanded transformation. That first laugh echoed in her memory every night she trained alone. She didn't say anything that day. She didn't need to, because Talia wasn't there to talk. She was there to learn. And eventually she'd teach them something too. Talia made a silent promise the first night she sat on the edge of her bed, muscles sore and mind racing from everything she'd failed to do on the mat. She whispered it into the dark, just for herself. "I won't quit, no matter how bad it gets." That promise became her shield. The gym wasn't kind. There were no encouraging cheers when she fumbled through drills, no nods of recognition when she arrived early or stayed late. She was invisible, unless someone needed a warm-up partner to dominate. And yet, every evening she returned. Her promise wasn't about vengeance or proving anything to them. It was about claiming space in a world that never made room for her. There was power in showing up, even when no one clapped, even when they rolled their eyes. And each time she tied her belt, crooked at first, eventually precise, she felt it cinch a little tighter around her resolve. The mat was no longer just a place of humiliation. It was where she was becoming someone new. She didn't make friends in the beginning. The other white belts talked during warm-ups, joked between drills, formed circles where she didn't belong. Talia became a ghost at practice, present but not part of anything. She observed more than she spoke, mimicking movements like a shadow. You'd think she resented the isolation, but in truth it gave her clarity. Without the distractions of friendship or validation, she tuned in to the mechanics. Her focus was unmatched. Every movement of the hip, every grip on the sleeve, every breath her opponent took. She studied it all. After class, while the others left, she stayed. She practiced solo drills on the side mats until the lights flickered. Coach never offered feedback. No one did, but she kept showing up. One of the assistant instructors once asked, "Why do you keep training alone?" She didn't answer, because the truth was simple. Talia wasn't building skill. She was building silence into strength. Each unnoticed hour stacked like bricks in the fortress she was quietly constructing within herself. The gym called itself Iron Ground, a place known for building champions. But for Talia, it felt more like a coliseum where she was thrown to be devoured. The culture inside wasn't warm or inclusive. It was dominated by egos and testosterone. Newcomers were either absorbed into the clique or ignored entirely. Talia, with her soft voice and downcast eyes, was invisible at best and a joke at worst. No one showed her the proper foot placement for guard passes. No one corrected her sweeps or helped adjust her chokes. It was as if they expected her to fail and were just watching the clock until she gave up. When sparring rounds began, she was the last to be picked if she was picked at all. Some rolled with her reluctantly. Others simply waved her off. Coach pretended not to notice. But Talia noticed everything. Every shrug, every smirk, every time someone intentionally upped their aggression just to see how fast they could make her tap. The gym didn't want her there, but that only made her want it more. The ridicule wasn't always loud, but it was constant. A chuckle when she lost balance. A raised eyebrow when she hesitated. Whispers from the sidelines as she tried and failed to complete a drill. One time during warm-ups, she slipped while shrimping across the mat. A blue belt named Corey laughed out loud and said, "She moves like she's stuck in molasses." Everyone laughed, including Coach. Talia said nothing. She just got up and finished the drill. They called her nicknames she pretended not to hear. Tissue, Feather, Princess Tap. But behind the teasing was fear disguised as arrogance. They didn't understand her calm. Her refusal to quit unsettled them. Every class she attended was a quiet battle, not just against her training partners, but against the voice in her head that sometimes whispered, "Maybe they're right." But every day she fought it, showing up anyway. If pain was the price of becoming unbreakable, she would pay in full. What they mistook for weakness was actually patience. And when the time came, that patience would break them before she ever had to. People assumed softness meant safety. Talia's wide, observant eyes made them think she was meek, easily broken, forgettable. But those eyes had seen more than most could guess. She had watched her older brother spiral into addiction and disappear from their lives. She had sat by her mother's hospital bed through long, sleepless nights. She had been cornered in parking lots, talked down to in meetings, and dismissed by men who spoke over her even when she had the answer. Talia had endured more than bruises. She had endured life itself, quietly, without complaint. That softness they mocked wasn't naivety. It was restraint. They had no idea the strength it took to stay composed when rage curled in her gut like fire. Every sparring match where she tapped too early, every drill she fumbled, those weren't losses. They were calculations. And behind her eyes, behind the delicate exterior, was someone who had been watching, memorizing, waiting. The others had spent years perfecting their dominance. Talia had been perfecting her timing, and they wouldn't see it coming. She went home with bruises that looked like war stories. Deep, fingerprint-shaped ones on her arms, knees scraped raw from hours of shrimping, and a persistent ache in her neck that ibuprofen barely dulled. Her room smelled like Tiger Balm and ambition. No one clapped when she hit her first clean sweep. No one patted her back after a hard roll. Her victories were silent, like her suffering. She didn't post progress selfies or journal every step. Talia's growth happened away from cameras, in the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the slap of mats against skin. She learned not just technique but control, the art of conserving energy, of letting others think they were in charge until the very moment they weren't. She learned to breathe through the panic, to smile through the pressure. And every bruise that healed made her sharper, stronger, quieter. She wasn't there for recognition. She was there to build something no one could take from her. Not their words, not their doubts, not even their fists. Coach Daniels ran the gym like a kingdom. His favorite students were the warriors he could mold into metal machines. Aggressive, loud, always hungry for domination. Talia didn't fit that mold. She didn't talk trash. She didn't force herself into conversations. To him, she was barely worth a nod. He never corrected her form, never praised her effort, never acknowledged when she stayed late to clean up the mats after everyone had gone home. Once, during a sparring round, she landed a perfect triangle choke on another white belt. Daniels had been walking by but didn't even pause to look. If any of his favorites had done the same, the whole class would have stopped to watch the replay. Talia learned quickly that some coaches only see what they expect to see, and Daniels had already decided what she was. Soft, insubstantial, background noise. But there's a funny thing about ignoring someone for too long. They stop trying to be seen and start building something no one can ignore. It happened during an open mat session on a rainy Thursday. The gym was half empty, and Daniels was preparing for a tournament by pairing students off for live sparring. A visiting black belt from a sister gym had stopped by Lucas Ferreira, known for being technical and cocky. "Who's next?" he asked after easily dispatching 2 blue belts. Daniels looked around, clearly scanning for someone experienced. But no one stepped forward. Then, almost without thinking, Talia stood. The room went still. Daniels raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" he asked, almost laughing. She nodded once. "Let her try." Ferreira smirked, clearly amused. The others chuckled. Corey actually whispered, "She's gonna get wrecked." But Talia stepped onto the mat with calm steps, tightening her belt slowly. She wasn't afraid. Not because she thought she could win, but because fear had stopped owning her a long time ago. This wasn't just a sparring round. It was everything she had trained for. Every bruise, every insult, every second she had spent in the shadows. This was her match, and it was about to change everything. The moment she squared off against Lucas Ferreira, the room leaned in. People who had never even spoken to her suddenly paused their roles to watch. Talia bowed, then settled into her stance. Lower, calmer than ever before. Ferreira smiled like he was about to demonstrate a technique on a training dummy. He moved quickly, hands confident, trying to collar drag her off balance. But Talia didn't flinch. She had drilled that exact movement 100 times alone on the wall mats. She absorbed the grip, shifted her weight, and mirrored his force without panic. The others expected her to scramble, to tap within seconds. Instead, she gripped his sleeve with precision, stepped into his guard, and began to control the tempo. She wasn't stronger, but she was patient. She didn't rush. She didn't try to prove anything. That patience frustrated Lucas. He ramped up the aggression. But Talia saw his tells, the subtle drop of his right hip, the way his breathing changed under pressure. And that was when she made her move. From the sidelines, the smirks were back. Corey leaned against the wall, arms crossed, already ready to laugh. Daniels watched with that same glazed disinterest. No one believed she'd last. But Talia had stopped caring about their predictions long ago. She stepped forward when most would have backed down. When Ferreira transitioned to a knee-cut pass, she shifted her hips and locked his arm before he could disengage. His face changed. Surprise flickered. She didn't just stop his pass. She flowed into a trap. While they all watched for her to make a mistake, she had been waiting for the opening. Her body moved before they could process what was happening. Her left leg looped around Ferreira's neck while her right secured the angle. The positioning was clean, tighter than even some blue belts could manage. Ferreira struggled to posture up, but she had already locked her triangle. The room stopped moving. Corey stood up. Daniels furrowed his brow. It wasn't just that she'd caught him. It was how easily she had done it. Like she had been waiting for this moment all along. Time slowed as her triangle choke tightened. Ferreira tried everything. Posturing up, twisting his shoulders, even digging his chin into her thigh. But Talia had drilled this finish every night for months, in her room with pillows against resistance bands on dummy partners. She knew every escape and how to cut them off. Her ankles locked behind his head, and she angled just enough to finish the choke clean. His movement slowed. The panic in his eyes replaced the casual arrogance from minutes earlier. He tapped, firm, fast, and loud enough to echo across the mats. A beat of silence followed. No one moved. No one clapped. Even Daniels looked frozen, trying to compute what just happened. Talia released the choke instantly and stood, adjusting her GI with the same calm she'd entered with. No celebration, no smile, just a quiet, respectful bow. Ferreira coughed, shook his head, and muttered, "What the hell?" But the question wasn't for her. It was for the others, because now they had no idea who they were looking at. Silence hung in the air like smoke. For a full 5 seconds, no one spoke. No one moved. The usual clamor of sparring sessions, the casual clapping after a good roll, all gone. The gym was dead quiet, save for Ferreira's shallow breaths and the creak of the mats under Talia's feet. She didn't gloat. She didn't scan the room for validation. She simply stepped off the mat, untying her belt slightly to adjust the knot, her hands steady. It was the kind of calm that couldn't be faked. That silence wasn't awkward, it was revelation. The people who had spent months mocking her, ignoring her, treating her like a burden, suddenly realized what had just happened. She hadn't just submitted a black belt. She had dismantled him. Technically, cleanly, without drama. And that silence said more than applause ever could. Talia didn't need their approval anymore. She never did. But in that silence, she heard something else. Respect. Unspoken, uneasy, and late, but real. And it was only the beginning. When she finally glanced up, their expressions told her everything. Corey's smirk had disappeared completely, replaced with a blank stare, as if trying to reconcile the image of Princess Tap with the woman who had just submitted a black belt. A couple of the white belts who used to pair off quickly to avoid her were now whispering to each other, eyes wide. Daniels hadn't said a word. His arms were folded, but his mouth was slightly open, just enough to show that for once, he didn't have a script ready. Some students nodded at her. Others looked away in embarrassment. Talia read their silence like a language she had mastered. She didn't need praise. Their discomfort, their sudden curiosity, their forced politeness. It was all proof, not just of her skill but of how wrong they had been. This wasn't just about one choke. It was the realization that someone they had written off had risen above them while they weren't looking. And they didn't even know when it had happened. Daniels cleared his throat. "Talia," he said, his voice tight. It was the first time he had spoken her name in front of the whole gym. Not her, not you, but Talia. For months, she had trained in silence, existed as a background fixture. Now she was being addressed, publicly, as a peer. "Good work," he added, short and awkward. But coming from him, it was more than enough. The room shifted after that. People began lining up again for roles, but the mood had changed. She noticed how some of them looked at her differently. One of the blue belts even asked, "Can we roll sometime?" Talia nodded once, but inside, she smiled. It wasn't about the compliment. It was about the recognition of time, effort, and grit, the kind that can't be taught. Daniels didn't become her champion overnight, but he didn't need to be. He had finally acknowledged what she had known all along. She belonged, and no one could take that from her anymore. What Talia didn't expect was the video. One of the students had filmed the match, probably thinking it would be a funny, watch this girl get folded clip for Instagram. But the opposite happened. The video showed everything. Ferreira's early smirk, her calm reaction, the flow of control, and finally, the perfectly executed triangle choke. Someone uploaded it to Reddit's BJJ community. Within hours, it hit thousands of upvotes. By morning, it had spread to Instagram Reels, TikTok breakdowns, even YouTube commentary channels dissecting her form. They called her the Silent Storm. Headlines read, "Soft-spoken white belt silences black belt with textbook triangle." She didn't chase the fame, but the story struck a chord. Comments poured in. Women thanking her for the inspiration. veterans applauding her composure, and coaches rethinking what they taught about underestimating new students. It was validation she didn't ask for, but deserved. And while others were shocked, Talia simply continued training. Viral or not, her journey wasn't about views. It was about proving to herself that she could be both soft and unstoppable. After the video exploded online, Talia's inbox lit up like wildfire. She received messages from journalists wanting to feature her story, podcast hosts inviting her to speak about overcoming doubt, and even female-centric fight apparel companies offering sponsorship deals. But what surprised her most were the apologies. Corey sent a single-line DM. "Didn't realize you were that good. Respect." Others followed suit, sheepishly acknowledging how they had treated her. Daniels, the coach who once barely noticed her, asked if she'd be interested in assisting with the beginner women's program. And from another city, a coach at a more inclusive gym reached out and said, "We'd be lucky to have you train with us." Talia read each message, letting the words settle like dust. She didn't respond to all of them because this wasn't about validation anymore. The world was catching up to what she already knew. They were late to her story, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that she had written it herself. And now they finally wanted to read it. Talia had every reason to gloat. Every reason to say, "I told you so," to post a smug video, to walk into class with a chip on her shoulder. But she didn't. The next day, she arrived early, just like always, tied her belt the same way, bowed to her partners with quiet respect, and rolled like nothing had changed. When Ferreira returned a week later, he gave her a nod across the mat. She nodded back. No grudge, no ego, just mutual acknowledgement. Talia understood something most never do. The win wasn't about defeating someone else. It was about defeating the version of herself who once believed she wasn't enough. That's why she didn't boast. Because the real victory wasn't the choke. It was the journey that made it possible. She had trained without applause. She had grown without guidance. And she had risen without anyone lifting her. That was her power. Her quiet, unwavering power. And those who had mocked her, they didn't deserve her resentment. They only proved how far she had come without them. Now, when Talia walks into the gym, no one looks past her. They move over to make space. They greet her. Some even ask for help. The same mats that once felt cold and unwelcoming now feel like her domain. Not because she conquered them, but because she earned them. The respect she receives isn't loud or showy. It's subtle. It's in the way people don't underestimate her anymore. It's in the way Daniels pauses to watch her rolls, in the way Corey nods when she passes, in the way white belts ask her what drills she recommends. It's a different kind of power now, one not built on dominance or intimidation, but quiet, undeniable proof. She doesn't train to prove people wrong anymore. She trains because this is who she is. Her softness wasn't a weakness. It was her edge. And the day she submitted a black belt wasn't her peak. It was just a reminder that when you embrace who you are, even the parts others mock, you don't just survive. You rise. You stun. You choke doubt itself into silence. What do you think? Was it skill, mindset, or something deeper that made her unstoppable? Let me know below. No matter where you're watching from, whether it's your couch, your gym, or halfway across the world, thank you for being here. Your time means everything. And if you enjoy real stories with unexpected twists, subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss what happens when the underestimated fight back. Thank you.